Hello, today's lesson is the brain. This will probably be in three parts, and we're going to start by talking about how to study the brain. How do scientists study the brain? Now, before you watch any of these videos, I hope that you watch. It's called The Brain, and it's from the History Channel, and it's on my website. And it starts off with a bunch of military stuff, and that's fine, but this video really helped me to learn a few parts of the brain really, really well. It's a good video. Watch the first 55 minutes of it. Okay. Now, this link isn't to that, but at the very end of this PowerPoint, this is the link to it, assuming that the link still works. Okay. All right. So first of all, let's talk about the brain. I don't want to get into this right now, but in class, what we do is we talk about how different animals' brains are different. Notice that some brains are more wrinkly than others. Some brains are more smooth than others. And we talk about how smart elephants are and how smart dolphins are and how humans seem to have a bigger frontal lobe, which means that humans are a little better about planning for the future. Okay, because that's what the frontal lobe does. And if you watch the video I suggest, you'll know that. Okay, all right. So these are the ways that we study the brain. I'll tell you what I've seen on the test. I've seen the word lesioning many times. I've definitely seen EEG. I have not seen CAT scan. I have definitely seen PET scan. I have not seen an MRI or a functional MRI. I might have seen MRI, but it doesn't matter what's on the AP exam. We're going to learn about all of these right now. Okay, so let's talk about accidents. Well, before we had all these fancy scanning machines, sometimes we would just wait for accidents to happen. That would be a good case study of how the brain works. The most famous is a guy named Phineas Gage. Now, this story goes way back, even before the Civil War, I believe. I don't remember when exactly it was. But the point is that Phineas Gage was working on the railroad and he was trying to take some dynamite and tamp it down, tap, 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 tappa, 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 in this dynamite into this hole, and boom! And this iron rod went through his cheek, destroyed his left eye, and destroyed his frontal lobe. And the bar did not stay there, by the way, but the bar landed 40 yards away, which, think about that, 40 yards. That's a long way away. But that's not even the most interesting part of the story. What's really interesting is that Phineas Gage survived. And what that tells us is that since the frontal lobe was destroyed, then that means that the frontal lobe is not essential for survival. Okay, the frontal lobe does a lot, but surviving, breathing, heart rate, the frontal lobe doesn't do that. Okay, so you could theoretically survive a gunshot wound to that part of the brain. I don't recommend it, but you could. So there's a wax figurine. Of course, the iron bar did not stay there. Phineas Gage ended up moving to South America and he suffered from seizures. He became an alcoholic and his life was never the same. Lesioning. So, another way to study the brain is to not wait for a Phineas Gage, but to purposefully damage a part of the brain. Okay, so let's say you're using rats, and in this case, this picture is a squirrel, but let's say you're using rats and you lesion a part of the brain. Like, let's say you're like a guy named Carl Ashley, and they talked about this in the film. This guy kept lesioning different parts of the rat's brain to see where memory was stored. And what Carl Ashley found out was that no matter where he lesioned the rat's brain, the rats would still find their way through the maze, which is evidence that memory is not stored in any one specific part. So that's what we mean by lesioning. We damage it on purpose. Okay. Another way, and this is very common on the test, is we study cancer. We study tumors in the brain. So if you have a tumor on this part of the brain and then you can't speak, then that means that part of the brain deals with speaking. Okay, so that's another form of lesioning. The EEG. So let's look at what the EEG stands for. EEG stands for electroencephalogram. Gram means to measure. Electricity. Enceph, it either means head or it means brain. I'm not sure. But the EEG, what it does is it measures brain waves. So if you're having an EEG, and if you're having a seizure, which is a storm of electricity, then an EEG is going to measure it. Okay? Make sure you watch all the videos on my website, but an EEG measures brainwaves. So if you're asleep, if you're awake, if you're meditating, if you're listening to music, if you're asleep, you're in a coma, the EEG can measure all of this. It measures brain activity, electrical brain activity. Then there's the CAT scan, a CT scan. And I've never seen this on the AP exam, but what it does is it takes a picture of your brain. Think of it as a 3D x ray. And this is good for taking a picture of your brain. It's not good at determining what function does this part of the brain do. But if you look, you see this picture, look at that. That's a tumor. So whoever this is probably dead. I don't know. But the point is that it's good for taking a picture. CAT scans are good for concussions, things like that. So basically, they're an old school MRI. MRIs do almost everything. It does a lot more than a CAT scan does, but CAT scans are just a cheaper, out of date version of an MRI. So there's a CAT scan example. It's like an x ray. And you see the tumor right here? The MRI. Now, if you watch Grey's Anatomy, you've seen lots of MRIs. It uses magnetics. And what it does is it takes pictures of your brain. So you get in an MRI, and what it does is it takes pictures of slices of your brain. So the doctor or the neurologist or the neuroscientist can take these pictures and go back and forth with a scroll on their mouse and look at different parts of your brain. It's good, and it's not just for the brain, it's for any part of your body. But if you're looking for a tumor in the brain, an MRI is a good way to do it. Okay? So there's an example of an MRI. So it's just an updated version of a CT scan. PET scan. Okay, definitely watch the video. A PET scan is nuclear medicine. Basically, what you do, and by the way, it stands for positron emission tomography. And what happens is you drink or get injected with a radioactive substance. And this substance attaches to your red blood cells. And so the machine picks up on this radioactive substance. So what it's looking for is it's looking for blood flow. Okay? And you can also tell it to look for specific neurotransmitters. Like for example, look at this PET scan down here. This is a normal brain looking at dopamine, and on the right is a meth abuser. So you can see its dopamine is all messed up. Here's a PET scan of a normal brain on the left and a depressed brain on the right. So think about what the major difference is. The normal brain has more brain activity, more greens, more reds. The redder it is, the more blood flow it is, the more brain activity you have. Depression is not sadness. Depression is the lack of vitality. You don't want to do anything. You don't want to go to the mall. You don't want to do anything fun. You don't want to go for a walk. You just want to sit there and do nothing. That's depression. And here's another PET scan example. At the top is a normal brain with normal dopamine activity. Now, check it out. This is a cocaine abuser 10 days after stopping cocaine. And what's happening is that when you do cocaine, your brain gets all this dopamine and it gets lazy. It says, well, why should I produce dopamine if you're going to give me all this cocaine? I don't need to produce dopamine. And so your brain gets lazy and shuts down. So now I don't say this from personal experience, but people who do a lot of cocaine, when they stop doing cocaine, all they want to do is say, oh my God, I just want to do cocaine, because their brain is like this. That's why you don't want to do too many drugs, because your brain gets lazy and it doesn't produce the neurotransmitters that it normally would. Even after 100 days, your brain is still not back to normal. Okay, so don't get into that crap. Okay, stay away from that stuff. Now, I've never seen this on the AP exam, but if you combine the PET scan and combine it with an MRI, two very expensive machines, you're going to have a functional MRI. And what it does is it takes detailed pictures of your brain in black and white, but it also measures brain activity. That's where the color comes in. That's a functional MRI. In the video I asked you to watch, they were trying to figure out like the serial killer and the amygdala, and they found that the serial killer's amygdala wouldn't light up as much. And the amygdala is the part of the brain that deals with fear and aggression. And serial killer or psychopaths, their amygdalas are smaller and they don't light up as much, not as much brain activity. We know that because of the fMRI machine. And if you're looking at anything, your visual cortex in the back of your brain lights up. Okay? So let's try some multiple choice. Now remember, hit the space bar to hit pause before I reveal the answer. This is not that easy of a question. Dr. Jones, a brain researcher, is investigating the connection between certain environmental stimuli and brain processes. Which types of brain scans is she most likely to use? Okay, so hit pause if you want to do this by yourself. All right, so which of all these brain scans and stuff, which one of these just takes a picture, and which one of these actually shows brain activity? Okay, so the MRI just takes a picture, so it's not A and it's not E. The EKG, it isn't a brain scan at all. The CATs, so that means it's not B either. And a CAT scan just takes a picture. So that leaves us with C. The PET scan measures brain activity, the fMRI, and the EEG would also work here. Okay, the EEG does measure brain activity. Okay. A participant in a study of music perception listens to music with electrodes attached to her scalp while the data are collected on the activity of her brain. Okay, this is the EEG. All right, it's measuring brain waves. The use of an electrode to destroy small areas of the brain beneath the surface. Okay, tricky question, because you see electrode and you think, oh, it's D. No, you're using you're destroying a part of the brain, so we're going to call that lesioning. Okay. This is an interesting question, the way that it's phrased. Metabolic activity in different areas of the brain can best be visualized by means of what? Okay, so think of blood flow. It's also, which one of these is a very visual brain scan? The answer is PET scan, positron emission tomography. All right, now that's it for how do we study the brain. Let's move on to the lowest, dumbest part of the brain, the hindbrain. Okay, so look down there, like a massage around your neck and your lower skull. That is your hindbrain. And your hindbrain even connects your spine with your brain. This, on an evolutionary scale, your brain, the lower it goes, the lower in evolution it is. So if you were to take your hindbrain and replace it with that of a crocodile, it would be almost the same. Okay, after a million years of evolution, your hindbrain hasn't changed much. And when you go up your brain, especially forward above your eyes, that is the more advanced part of your brain. Now, I'm telling you this, I haven't seen these words on the AP exam, but I have seen these. The medulla or medulla, I think it's how it's pronounced, and the cerebellum. If you are taking notes, hit pause and write this down. In class, I also ask people to draw this on their note card. Because remember, when you're drawing stuff, it really helps you to really let it sink in. So the medulla. The medulla is basically down in your neck and it connects your brain with your spinal cord. Your medulla deals with breathing, heart rate, and blood pressure. Okay, now, so let me ask you something, and this is important. What do you think would happen if you damaged your medulla? You would be dead. Right, you would be totally dead. You would stop breathing, your blood pressure would drop, you would die. Okay? So if Phineas Gage had his medulla damaged, he wouldn't have survived. Instead, he had his frontal lobe damaged. Now moving on to cerebellum. Cerebellum is part of the hindbrain and it deals with balance and muscle coordination. So if you're an athlete, you care very much about your cerebellum. If you're a dancer, obviously we all care about our cerebellum because you can't play video games without your cerebellum. Cerebellum is where you get your hand-eye coordination. Okay? I like to say your cerebellum is where you get your autopilot. You know how like you're driving a car, whether it's on video game or in a real car, you're just on autopilot and you just do things without thinking. That's your cerebellum. Okay, when you're playing a musical instrument and you already have a song memorized and you're just playing and you're not really thinking about it, that's your cerebellum. And how do you let your cerebellum take over? Practice, 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 practice. So, medulla, heart rate, blood pressure, breathing. Cerebellum means little brain. It coordinates fine muscle movements and balance. So if you're aiming a gun, whether it's a real gun or a video game gun, you're using your cerebellum. You're driving a car, you're playing a video game, that's your cerebellum. Or you're walking. So what would happen if you damage your cerebellum? What would happen if you drink too much alcohol and you lose your balance? That could be your cerebellum. Okay, if you ever watch Powerpuff Girls, you might get this reference, Miss Cerebellum. Okay, so let's try this. Difficulty in typing smoothly on a keyboard would most likely result from damage to the what? Okay, so think autopilot. When you're typing, you're not thinking, okay, take my left pinky and lift up to hit A. No, you're not thinking about it. You just do it. That's your autopilot. That's your cerebellum. Which of the following would most likely result from an injury to the medulla? Okay, hit the space bar, hit pause, think about it. So what would happen if you damage your medulla? You're dead. You're dead. You'd stop breathing, your heart would stop beating. All right, an outdated meme. All right, what is the reticular formation? Okay, so here's the deal. Here's a way to remember it. Tickle, 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 tickle. Tickling arouses you. Okay. Now, I know that sounds weird, but imagine you're taking a nap and I come up to you and I go tickle, 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 and then it arouses you from your nap. The reticular formation deals with consciousness. Okay. So if you're asleep, if you're awake, if you're meditating, that's being dealt with by your reticular formation. If you damage this, let's say you're going to get in a really bad car accident, if you damage this, you could be in a coma. Okay? So cuz you're not conscious anymore, you are unconscious. So you would be in a coma. Tickle, 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 tickling arouses you. The thalamus. Oh boy, students always have trouble with this one. The thalamus is the relay station of the brain. The thalamus takes messages from one part of your brain and sends it to another part of your brain. So, for example, if an image goes in your left eye, that image goes to your thalamus, and then your thalamus sends that message to the right side of your occipital lobe in the back of your brain. So that's why your left brain controls the right side of your body. It's because of the thalamus. That's true with eyesight, it's true with touch on your skin. The messages that go from your left arm go to the right side of your brain because it goes through the thalamus. Think of it as like one of these switchboard ladies from the 60s. That's what your thalamus does. Okay, the limbic system. Hit pause, write all this down, even draw it if you want. I'm gonna teach you all four of these right now. The limbic system deals with our emotions. Okay? It deals with your hormones, it deals with your glands, it controls all your glands. We're going to go through all of this stuff. Okay? The hypothalamus. Boy, the hypothalamus does so much. Now, it can be summarized by the four F's. The four F's of the hypothalamus are fight or flight, feeding or hunger, and mating. Okay, those are the four F's, okay, or sexual desire. Because all of that stuff is controlled by your hormones. Your hypothalamus is about the size of an almond and it controls every gland in your body. So think about in your hormones, your hypothalamus controls your hormones. So fight or flight, what hormone is related to fight or flight? That's adrenaline. Feeding and hunger. Well, there's insulin, and then there's leptin and ghrelin. Okay, those are hunger hormones. And what about sexual desire? What hormone controls that? Testosterone. Okay, so your hypothalamus controls all of your glands and it controls your hormones. That's a lot of stuff. The hypothalamus does so much. Okay, so the hypothalamus controls sexual pleasure. And so imagine this, you see that rat? It's got an electrode attached to the sexual pleasure zones of your hypothalamus. So all it has to do is hit this button and psst, orgasm, psst, orgasm. And it's like, and the rat will crawl across an electrified grid to hit that button. Incredible, incredible. This is a little too much information. I go into it again in the emotion and motivation chapter. All I want you to know now is that the hypothalamus deals with satisfying your hunger and it deals with the stimulation of your hunger. Okay? The ventromedial gives you the signal that you're full and you don't need to eat anymore. The lateral hypothalamus, if you stimulate that, you will get hungry. Okay? And they've done this with rats. They'll lesion the hypothalamus, and some rats will get really fat because they will never get the signal to stop eating. But if you were to destroy the part of your hypothalamus that gives you the hunger signals, then you would never want to eat the rest of your life. The hypothalamus deals with satiety, the satisfaction of hunger signals. And if you're trying to lose weight, listen to your hypothalamus. Listen for that signal so you don't eat more than you really need to. The hippocampus deals with memory. Now, it's not where we store our memories, but what it does is it converts short-term memory into long-term memory. So if I give you my phone number, 469-235-9087, and then you try to remember it long enough to write it down, that's your short-term memory. In your hippocampus, if you do what you're supposed to do, you can remember it in the long term. If you damage the hippocampus, you will be like Dory the fish or like 10-Second Tom. Okay? Make sure you watch all the videos on my website. But so here's another way to remember that hippocampus deals with memory. Hey, remember the time that Hippo was on campus? I remember that. I'll never forget the time that there was a hippo on campus. Remember that? I remember. Amygdala. So if you see something scary, that's your amygdala. And everyone meet my girlfriend, Amy G. Dalla. She's scary. The amygdala is, so if you see something really scary, like a snake or a spider or something, and you get afraid, or you're driving at night and you see a car coming at you that you didn't see before and you get scared, that's your amygdala getting activated. And your amygdala is a part of your limbic system. So imagine if you had no amygdala, you'd be like a psychopath. You'd think roller coasters are boring. You would have no fear. And then there's the pituitary. The pituitary secretes at night a growth hormone. So if you have like a 10-year-old little brother or little sister, sometimes you'll see them go for a really long 12-hour sleep and they'll wake up and they'll actually look a half-inch taller. You'll think, did you grow last night? It's possible that they did. Okay? That comes from the pituitary. The pituitary secretes a growth hormone. So imagine if you had a tumor on your pituitary. You could be a dwarf, you could be a giant, it would mess with your growth. And this is controlled by your hypothalamus because all glands are controlled by your hypothalamus. All right. The hindbrain consists of the what? All right, look at your notes if you need to. It's down low. The answer is cerebellum, medulla, and the pons. I don't teach the pons. Okay. The thalamus. Students always miss this one. The thalamus can be characterized as what? All right, hit pause, the space bar. The answer is it's a relay system. Okay, AP question. Significant damage to which of the following parts of the brain will most likely cause a person to fall into a deep coma from which the person will be unable to awaken? All right, so you damage this, you're going to be in a coma. The answer is tickle, tickle, tickle. Tickling arouses you. When people consume large amounts of alcohol, they are often unable to recall what they did and said while they were drinking. This occurs because alcohol interferes with the brain's ability to form new memories. Memories. The answer is remember the hippo on campus? Remember that? How could you forget? Electrically stimulating a rat's amygdala would most likely produce which of the following? Okay. The amygdala deals with aggression and fear. Which area of the brain is not well developed until after 3 years of age, offering a possible explanation for infantile amnesia? In other words, how come you don't remember getting your diaper changed? You don't remember that time, possibly because this part of the brain is not well developed yet. So, which part deals with memory? The hippocampus. Which of the following most accurately characterizes the role of the hypothalamus in the regulation of hunger? Okay, so hunger has to do with hormones. Okay, so which one of these answers deals with hormones? That's what the hypothalamus does. The answer is B. So think about it. If you damage this part of the hypothalamus, you could end up weighing 600 pounds because you never get the signal that you're full. The brain scans of people with amnesia are most likely to show damage to the what? Amnesia means you don't remember, memory. So the answer is hippocampus. And that's it for today. Thank you very much.